Well, thank you everybody for joining, and Mark will admit more as they sign on, but my name is Carrie Jones. I'm with North Carolina Youth Soccer. I'm the Administrative Technical Director for our Player and Coach Development Department. If you may know me, whether it's from ODP or Youth Academy, Recreation, and Coaching Ed. I'm also an athletic trainer by trade. So you may see me from the medical side at events like State Cup. It's my honor, my pleasure to introduce you all tonight to Dr. Brad Miller and Matt Spear from Soccer Resilience. Soccer Resilience is a sports mindset agency, and Dr. Brad Miller and Matt Spear, both North Carolina natives, are the founders, and they're going to share some foundational explanations, plus activations, tools, and strategies of sports psychology. Dr. Brad Miller is a licensed clinical psychologist, and he spent over 20 years helping youth and adult athletes grow their ability to control their performance, anxiety, and their stress, to persevere and improve their overall sports performance. Brad played at Wake Forest University, and as a lifelong soccer player, coach, and parent, he believes he knows a thing or two about the game. So thank you for being with us, Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Carrie. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Matt Spear has excelled in every arena he's touched, including as a captain of an NCAA Division I Final Four team. He was an NCAA Division I head coach at Davidson College. He was a pro soccer team president, and GM up in Richmond. And he is a sports marketing entrepreneur and a leadership consultant with Love United FC. I have had the privilege of listening to both Dr. Miller and Matt speak in various regards of soccer resilience from a leadership perspective, and then with players as well. And I'm excited for what they're going to share with us tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you all. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. A couple things. We want this to be about you. We want you to learn. We want you to ask questions. So to get us started, if you don't mind, in the chat, would you just type in what your role is? Are you a coach? Are you an administrator? Are you a soccer parent? Anything helps us give us a little bit of idea of the audience tonight. So when you got some time, it helps Brad and I get an idea of who our audience is. So use the chat there just to write in soccer organization president or what have you. And during the session, definitely encourage you to type in comments or questions into the chat. And certainly at the end, we're going to encourage you to ask questions as well. Brad and I are North Carolina natives. We're going to show you a picture to verify that very, very soon. So thanks for being here tonight. It's Matt Spear and Brad Miller. Brad, you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right, and I just want to say welcome to you all as well. And our name is Soccer Resilience, and we'll talk a lot about things that can help players and coaches and parents on the field, but we also, these same tools and strategies help with life off the field. And we believe that one of our core values is more than an athlete. And so really helping those athletes have those tools and strategies, not just to navigate the challenges of soccer, but of life. So we're excited to get started with you tonight. And our topic is how coaches and parents can help strengthen grit in their players. Okay, so here's a picture of Mr. Spear and I. As Carrie said, clinical psychologist for 20 years. I'll just tell you a little bit briefly about my background. I grew up in Winston-Salem along with my counterpart there, Matt Spear. We'll kind of see some pictures there soon. Played for Winston-Salem Twins, and my senior year got recruited to go play at Wake Forest, and so that was really a dream come true for me. I had always kind of been an aggressive defender, and when I got to Wake, I was really kind of ready to go and take on the challenge. I was kind of a diamond in the rough, had a lot of work I had to do to get my technical skills where they needed to be. And I was prepared for that, and I did. I worked really hard. I worked my way up the lineup throughout my years there. My last year, I got some significant starts, which was really rewarding. But the thing I was completely unprepared for was performance anxiety. As a youth player, kind of soccer was my therapy. That's where I would go to get away from stress. And I didn't worry about playing time or starting. I really had started almost every game I had played as a youth player. But when I got to Wake, it was totally different. And my brain just kind of went haywire on me. And I would worry a lot about mistakes I would make. I'd worry about future mistakes that I would make. And even when things went well in practice or a game, my brain kept coming back to my mistakes. And I just really started to lose confidence at times. It affected my performance. It definitely affected my joy. And I developed a love-hate relationship with soccer. And I had some great experiences from my time there, but it really was really hard and stressful for me. And so when I graduated and wanted to become a psychologist, one of my things is I really wanted to learn more about how to help players deal with some of those things that I didn't really know how to deal with when I was at Wake Forest. And so fortunately, through, kind of training and working with players, try different skills and strategies, they would come back and say, hey, this stuff is really helping. Like, I'm starting to feel like myself. I can kind of bounce back quicker. I'm feeling more free. I'm having more fun. And I wanted to expand that beyond just one-on-one. And so we developed Soccer Resilience, where we can work with teams and organizations like North Carolina Youth Soccer Association to really help coaches and parents and players have these tools to help them have that more confidence and fulfillment and increase their performance. So just really happy to be here tonight. I'll turn it over to Matt Spear.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I'll do a reverse chronology. I actually saw Carrie this past weekend in Kansas City at the United Soccer Coaches Convention. I was fortunate to be out there doing a presentation, and I was really talking about modern leadership and handling the pandemic stress with an emphasis on mindfulness and holistic well-being. And I came to this project, Soccer Resilience, as most previously a president of a pro soccer team, but really the bulk of my career was an NCAA Division I coach at Davidson. And so from Winston-Salem, like Brad said. But when I was a soccer coach, the focus was so much on the first three pillars they talked about when you go to these soccer education courses, which is the technical, the tactical, and the physical. And the psychological was always on, the page as one of the four important pillars, but it was really never trained and never talked about. And for obvious reasons, there's a stigma around psychology. There's unknown how to actually train it. And I think the pandemic has really kind of made us realize that the psychological side, in many ways, is what I call the software to really help the hardware, the technical, tactical, and athletic pieces that the coaches and kids pour so much time into to actually come to fruition, to provide great performance and what Brad talked about, which is joy. So Brad, you can show the next slide.
So if you look at this was back in, I think it was probably 1980 or so. So you can take a guess of who is, Matt's on the front row, I'm in the back row to give you a clue. So on the bottom left, that's Matt Spear, you can probably see that. And next to the goalie on the right with the big mushroom hair, that is me. So Matt and I, Matt was our center mid, I was our center back, and the team up with Soccer Resilience, and then the team up tonight to present to you all is really special for us. All right, so these are the four pillars of Soccer Resilience, and we feel that if you can really work on strengthening these areas, you will not only have resilience on the field, but off the field. And we're going to talk tonight mostly about pillar 3, and that is that build perseverance. And sometimes we use the word grit and perseverance. We're going to talk more about what grit really means and how to strengthen it. And we're going to also talk a little bit about that first pillar, take control, how to get more control over your emotions so then you can think and problem solve to really execute those things to help you manage the stress and have that grit and perseverance. All right, our focus tonight is 3 main things. We're going to talk about the brain's negative bias. Yes, we're going to learn about the brain and why it tends to focus on the negative. We're also going to talk about tools to strengthen players' grit. And lastly, helping players respond well to setbacks, not only being able to push through, but then respond well.
So a question for you guys to put an answer into the chat. You can read that question to yourself, but I'll also read it out. What percentage do you think the mind plays in performance? So to clarify that, on a big game Saturday, for the team to play its absolute best, for a player to really perform and the coach to really be spot on, what percentage of that performance is mental? There's no right or wrong answer. Just take a moment and people just type in the chat and see a few numbers coming in. Just curious what you guys think. This is trying to get you to draw you in to think about psychology, mentality, mental fitness is a word that we're really going to talk about. So I see some different numbers coming in there, 60, 70, 50, 80. Okay, yeah. And obviously the next question, how important it is in life, it's clearly very, very important as well. So when we think about that, you think, okay, gosh, whether you're a soccer coach, you're a soccer parent, you're a soccer player, you're a soccer administrator, and you've all said kind of 60 to 80 to 90%. And that's usually about what we get. When I delivered this presentation to the Major League Soccer's Player Association, and Clarence Goodson, who is a former U.S. national team for the World Cup, said, Matt, at least 90%. That's just a World Cup player. But still, youth soccer is a little bit different. I recognize that, but we still want to perform and be our best. But we realize it's important. The question now is, how much time do we, not just you, but we as well, because we're soccer parents ourselves, spend time on mental fitness? How much do we train it? How much do we know about it? And we recognize it's usually really low. Usually when I ask that question with a slide, people say, gosh, none, or 5% or 20%. So we go into this thing thinking we know it's important, but we're not really doing a whole lot about it. That's okay, because good news, we got Soccer Resilience here for you tonight and moving forward to be able to give you tools and strategies to elevate that performance, to make you more poised on and off the field. And a quick little caveat, Brad, you didn't know this, but I actually have to use some of my Soccer Resilience Take Control skills and activations today because I went to the dentist, and I'm not a good person at the dentist. I can get a little bit claustrophobic, I can get a little bit panicky, and I had to really take a moment to work on some things we're going to share with you, some deep breathing, some calming mechanisms to get my visualization right, my affirmations right, and then I came out of that and I was totally fine. Go ahead to the next slide, Brad.
You got it. All right, so a question we have for you is, what is the brain's number one job? Now, Matt and I always have a debate. If my brain actually looks like this, being 6'3", playing back in the late 80s, early 90s, you really had to head the ball a lot, right? As a defender, that was a big thing that I did. And so I've had a lot of soccer balls. I don't know if my brain does quite look like that, but what do you think the brain's number one job is? Let's put in the chat, what's the brain's number one job? Above all else, this is the most important job. What do you think it might be? We have some people thinking, Matt.
Okay.
Who wants
No
to
right or wrong answer. You can have some fun with it as well.
Okay, protection. Yes, direct the body. What else to do? Okay, those are all really, really important. And Carrie, you really kind of got that. It's a number one's job. The brain's number one job is to keep you alive. And definitely important, Matt, not to blow our top, but it's the number one job is to keep us alive, right? If your brain is not good at job number one, it doesn't matter how great you are at skateboarding, piano, art, dance, taking PKs, you want to be here to enjoy it, right? So the brain's got to be really, really good at that. Well, for the brain to be so good at that, it's got to have this mechanisms where it is really, really constantly looking for danger around us, where it might be in the future and where it was in the past that we can remember to help us now. So the brain then is going to overly focus on the negative because our brain wiring really comes from back when they were saber-tooth tigers. When they were saber-tooth tigers, we lived in the cave and life was scary. Life was dangerous. Going outside of your cave to find food meant you could die. So the brain was like super on alert for any potential sign there could be a saber-tooth tiger around. So that was really, really good because you wanted to be alive back then. Well, now we don't have saber-tooth tigers, but our brain is still wired the same way. And our brain doesn't know the difference between, an emotional threat of feeling like disappointed, sad, stressed, and scared versus rattlesnakes or bears coming out of the woods. So what that means is that as a soccer player and coach and parent, that our brain is going to overly focus on what could go wrong. That's why when a player is moving towards the ball, their brain goes, oh gosh, just don't make a mistake. Just don't lose the ball. Just don't turn it over. Just don't let them score. Just don't do something bad and coach yanks you out. Our brain is wired to focus on those things. When we're thinking about the present moment, you could be up 2-0 and there's just a minor foul called and you could get really upset because you're not thinking about the big picture. We're up 2-0, things are going great versus why did they make that poor call? And after a game's over, you're walking off the field and you're thinking, wow, 5 things went well, 1 didn't. And your brain just keeps focused on that one thing that didn't over and over and over because it's wired to keep remembering where the danger was. So because of that, it makes things a lot more stressful sometimes with soccer, but there's lots of tools we're going to talk about to help you. So, okay, how negative exactly is the brain? Like, I get it, it's wired to kind of be negative and think things are dangerous maybe when they're not. Well, let's put this into the chat. What percent do you think of our daily thoughts are negative? The average person, average day, what percent of our daily thoughts are negative? 75, 80, 80, 80. Okay. Wow. Carrie and Gregory. Okay, you guys are right. About 80%. So think about that for a moment. If about 80% of our daily thoughts are negative, that means on really difficult, challenging, stressful days, there's going to be a lot more negative. And so knowing that as a coach, our brain can go to think of the negative more than the positive, so we can over focus on what's not working versus what is. We can do that as parents and as players. Now we want to find the strategies that really help us gain control, kind of clear our mind out, be in the present, and be more accurate in seeing the whole picture, not just what isn't going well, but what can be going well too. And Matt's going to give you a really good tool to help you do that.
So I love this photo because it shows Jessica McDonald, who is one of our Soccer Resilience co-founders with Brad and myself, and Wells Thompson, who's also a North Carolina native, longtime pro, played at Wake Forest as well, and MLS Cup champion. Jessica, as you probably know, two-time NCAA champion in North Carolina, three-time NWSL champion, and 2019 World Cup champion. And this picture shows her what she does, everybody, every single game. So what she does is, before the game starts, before she even starts her physical warm-up, she wants to get mentally prepared and aware and present for that match. So she goes to the 18-yard spot, penalty spot, and she gets a nice power pose with her hands on her hips and shoulders back, and her good firm grounded with her feet. And she closes her eyes and she does some deep breathing. And that way she's able to get positive and present. And that's the most important thing about performance, is being positive and present, because otherwise we're thinking about a mistake we made earlier in the game or last game, or we're worrying about the future, which Brad said, like, oh my gosh, if I give this ball away, what's going to happen? Performance is really about being calm and present. But our brain is constantly, with all these thousands and thousands of thoughts and negative bias, it keeps changing. So a really good way to emotionally regulate and bring yourself back to a positive center is to breathe first, as it says, and problem solve second. So the breathing calms yourself down, it regulates your emotions, and it keeps your focus where it should be in a positive way. So we wanted to show that to you. And then in the next slide, go ahead, Brad, show you another visual, is you guys maybe have done some deep breathing before. I actually train athletes and players and coaches, as does Brad. And one of the examples, the clubs I work with, is NC Fusion. And we actually practice this with their coaches and practice this with inhale, your stomach should come out. So if you all could just, wherever you are, whether in your living room or your couch, sorry about that, just take a quick second and do 2 or 3 sample breaths where, when you inhale through your nose, you want to feel your belly come out. All right, when you exhale, your belly's going to tuck in. So just do 2 breaths on your own. We'll just take a practice. Go ahead. And just 2 or 3 breaths is all it takes to calm those emotions down. And again, bring you back to a nice, peaceful place where you can think clearly and think positively. Go ahead to the next slide, Brad. So this is one more example of breathing. Thank you for whoever said I feel better. It's remarkable what it does to you when you have a moment of stress. When I give presentations to teams, I always say, if you take one thing away, players, and these are as young as like 10 or 11 years old that Brad and I work with, all the way up to college and professionals. I say, if I can give you one thing, before you get out of that car, just do 3 deep breaths. You don't have to think about anything incredible. It will bring you back to a positive center and make you more intentional. Same thing with parents when they get a little stressed out, which Brad and I do. We're parents as well. Same thing for coaches on the sidelines. Before you give that rah-rah halftime speech, maybe even before the player goes in off the bench and the substitute, take 2 or 3 deep breaths. It's a remarkable and simple tool that anybody can do. You see this one here, the 4-4-4 triangle breathing is very, very well known. I'm going to give you a quote from Mark Devine, former Navy SEALs manager. He said, "It was instrumental in saving my life several times in crises. I was able to remain calm and focus clearly to avoid reactionary thinking, or worse, panic." So we don't want to react, we want to respond. We don't want to panic, we want to stay calm in any kind of situation that is intense, and certainly athletics and parenting and coaching are as well. So everybody just take a quick practice of that. I'll let you do it on your own. Maybe I'll even count it out. So just kind of get yourself comfortable and I'll count it out. Okay, so inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. So again, that's just one really good example. It's called triangle breathing. You can do it different ways. There's no right or wrong way to work on breathing, but there are some great tools, and want to at least show you a couple examples. Go ahead, Brad.
All right, so we have a video for you to watch, and so we're talking about grit. So we're going to watch this video and see what you might find in here, some examples of grit.
You want to know the secret to victory? Fail to make the varsity team.
Start your career as a walk-on.
Go 3-13 your rookie season.
Lead the league in interceptions.
Take a perfect team and blow a perfect season.
Spend 108 years as a lovable loser.
Be on the wrong side of the biggest upset in your sport.
You really want to know the secret to victory?
And heartbreak for Matt Ryan, who is in utter disbelief.
Defeat.
Come on, one more.
Again.
Make defeat your fuel.
Okay, so when you see that video, I don't know about you, but I get my eyes lit up. I was like, the secret to victory. Yes, finally, somebody's got the secret to victory. I know what it is. And I'm watching this commercial, and so Michael Jordan comes on, talking about getting cut from the varsity team as a sophomore. I'm like, okay. And Peyton Manning, went 3-13 as a rookie. His brother Eli, he leads league interceptions. J.J. Watt is a walk-on. And Serena Williams' biggest upset, Matt Ryan, was up 28-3 in a Super Bowl and lost. And they say the key to victory is defeat. So I'm just curious if anybody wants to, through the chat, or wants to say, how could defeat be a key to help you have victory? Like with your team, do you think, it's the best thing we can do to help our team be able to win is just have them lose, heartbreakingly lose, right? Struggle, go 3-13. Okay. Make every moment a learning opportunity. Matt has a great question. Is it helpful, unhelpful, or it depends? And that's what we're going to talk about today, right? Going through difficulties, going through struggles, you learn from your mistakes. Okay, you experience failure to grow. So difficulties, setbacks, failure, all those things, they are opportunities to learn and grow from, but it's not automatic, right? What it takes to do that is having that grit. And how do we define grit? Grit, we're going to think of as that perseverance. You stick with something, things that are hard and difficult. You stick with them and you don't quit. You don't give up. Now, do you think that means that when you have grit, you don't get scared or sad or frustrated or disappointed? Of course you do. Michael Jordan, when he got cut from his high school basketball team as a sophomore, the first thing he did, he went home, locked himself in his room, and he cried, right? It was hard, and he felt it. He said he was embarrassed he didn't make the team. Then he went out and said, okay, you know what? I'm going to stick with it. His mom kind of motivated him, and he motivated himself, and he went and he practiced basketball before school, and then would go to school, and then after practice to get better. So grit is that ability to stick with something, bounce back. The great part about grit is we can all learn it. It's not something you're born with. We can all learn it. It doesn't matter about your gender, your race, your age, any of that. It's something you can learn, and it's a skill that can be grown and developed. And we're going to talk about some real important ways that you as a parent and coach can do for yourself, and then how that also can translate to your player. Okay. So how to strengthen grit? Great question. Lots of ways to do it. We're going to talk about just a couple today, but we hope this gets you sparked and motivated to keep exploring other ways to help build grit, right? That perseverance, sticking with something. And something to grit is not just like, people think of like physical strength, right? Going in hard on tackles, winning tackles. Grit is the mentality to stick with something. And often grit on the outside can look like we're overwhelmed, doesn't look like we're doing as well, right? But it's that ability to stick with it in those times. That's what grit truly is. So Matt, what are some ways that coaches can model grit?
Yeah, I like how you describe grit, not necessarily just as physical toughness, because as a male, sometimes we always think it's just this macho thing. It's not. We have this great slide in another presentation that shows a picture of Mia Hamm, which you guys know, part of the 1999 Women's World Cup, one of the greatest athletes in American history, not just American female history. And she talks about that mistakes and setbacks happen all the time. It's how we deal with it. And that's the true test of mental fitness and character. And that's what we want you to do as leaders, as parents, and particularly coaches. You need to model it and recognize and be vulnerable and authentic, and raise your hand when you make a mistake and you do something wrong. Don't try to be perfect. That's an old school way of leadership. New leadership principles are just saying, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm going to give my best. And that's really what excellence is. And so we have a question for you that it goes like this. If I want my team, or if I want my player to be blank, then I need to be blank. And so just type a word in the chat. Just think of yourself. If I want my team to be blank, then I need to be blank. Just type in one word. Or if you're a coach, if I want my player to be blank, then I need to be blank. Let's see what words you come up with. What are words that you like to model? It doesn't have to be the word grit. I'm going to put so some words coming in. Positive. I put in grateful. Gratitude is my 2022 one word of my year that I'm focusing on. Anybody else got a word? I have to put our brand in there. Resilient, which really has a lot to overlap with grit and perseverance. A lot of these kind of are synonyms. They're not exactly alike, but they do overlap. Encouraging, I like that, Gregory. Be a good sport. Yep. So it's really important as parents, as coaches and leaders, that we model whatever we think is important, and to tell the players that we believe it's important, so they recognize that. But they're always going to look at you as the model. So most importantly, starts with modeling whatever you think is important. With the word grit, as Brad has explained it from a psychologist point of view, but you have to be able then to extrapolate it. What does it look like in your arena? What is your team? If you're a U7 coach, that's very different grit than a college coach, than a high school coach, than a club coach. And so think about what it means to you in your particular space. Or if you're an organizational head or an administrator in your internal team, both above and below you, as part of your ecosystem, what is that word? And if the word is grit that we're focusing on, how do you show that? How do you amplify that? And how do you articulate what it means to you? And how do you point out positives when you see it? Really, really important that we shout praise and whisper criticism. Really, really big on that. The old school way of coaching was shout criticism, whisper praise. People don't respond to that. It's not a generational thing, it's a human thing. So really focus on positive reinforcement of whatever particular themes that you pick, such as grit. Go ahead, Brad.
All right, so as parents, for those of you who are parents here, right, modeling grit, and that same question that Matt asked for the coaches, right, is for the parents. How we, what we want to see our kids be is that we need to be that. So it's really important that, I think Matt mentioned more is caught than taught. I have a teenage son and daughter, and certainly I've given them many, many lectures and told them many, many things. But the truth is, maybe that's about 5% of what they're going to take in. Probably 95 is, what does he really do? Right? How does he really handle himself or deal with difficulties in situations? I certainly make a lot of mistakes. But one thing I've really learned is that when we model grit, it's not just being stoic and not showing stress or emotion, and difficulties happen and we just sort of are like a robot. That's not really what happens, because then kids take in, well, I guess then I'm supposed to be that way. I'm not allowed to be scared, or I'm not allowed to be stressed or worried or confused. So what's really helpful is, say you have an example, you have like car problems and it's making things really difficult, getting your family to work, getting your kids where they need to go, and it's stressful. So you just let them know, like, hey, we're having car problems and, it's kind of stressful. We're not quite sure what's going to happen. Didn't expect this. It's kind of a surprise. I'm a little, I'm kind of stressed out from it, but you know what? I'm going to figure it out. Your mom and I are going to have a conversation, or I'm going to have a conversation with some friends and people who can kind of help me. And we're going to be resourceful, right? We're going to figure out who else can, maybe if we can borrow a car, if we can get transportation for you guys set up, we're going to figure it out. We'll make it work. And when you do that, you acknowledge that you have stress, you have difficulties, but that you're going to get support when needed. You're going to problem solve, and you believe that with you sticking with it, you're going to figure it out. And that's what we want our kids to do, right? We don't want our kids just to, kind of feel something and be numb to it, because that's not really dealing with it, right? That they can feel those things, but then they can push through them. So modeling that is very, very important for them to really kind of follow that. And that certainly goes on the soccer field, right? If you're watching your kid play and it's a tight game, there's the last 10 minutes and the ref gives, poor call, and there's a PK, and your hands go up in the air and you're just like, what? Can you believe this? And you're yelling and screaming, right? You're modeling for the kids. It's a disaster, right? If you can stay calm and composed and you kind of look at them and give them the nod and just go, hey, we got 10 minutes, keep working. We got 10 minutes. That's modeling for them what you want them to do. All right. So how do we really keep working on building grit, right? So now let's say we've got our coaches and our parents and administrators, we've got people modeling this, but what about other ways? Well, a really powerful way is that confidence comes from being prepared. When we feel prepared for something, we know what to expect, we can plan for it, and then we can be prepared and we can execute and do that. So our brain, the two things the brain dislikes the most is uncertainty, not knowing, and negative surprises. And certainly with the pandemic, we continue to have that very often, right? We think things are better, maybe they're not. People getting sick, or how are they doing? What's open, what's not? Where can we play? Where can't we play? All of these things make it really hard. So when you can make something predictable, now we know what to expect. Now we can plan for it because we know it's coming, and that helps us deal with it and have that grit and stick with things. So let's break this down in piece by piece and how coaches and parents can do this for players. And Matt will take the first part here. This is predicting challenges. Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
My bad. So we talked about earlier that the brain has that negative bias. So we have to be proactive to be able to handle that negative bias. And this is the first of the triple Ps, the predict. Our brain can go into threat mode when it should just be in called challenge mode. It's like we miss a play, it's okay, get the ball back. Or also starts raining in the game, doesn't matter. We played in the rain before, So we're trying to anticipate things so as we don't have those negative surprises. You're still going to have occasionally weird things happen, but the more you practice these, mindfulness and handling setbacks in a constructive way, you'll be able to take on even the ones you're not prepared for. So coaches can really help the team and the players predict situations. It could be playing a man down, or it could be a field that's much smaller than usual. They can train and practice these things. But here's a couple examples. You can read the screen. I'll read them out loud though. Situations like a player performs poorly in a drill. Okay, how are you going to react to that? How are you going to respond to that? Are you going to ask a question? Are you going to make the drill a little bit easier? Or are you just going to keep at it? Player makes a mistake, leads to goal. Happens at every level. I watch the Premier League. It happens at every single level, World Cup level. Goalkeepers, millionaire goalkeepers have the ball go through their legs. So they have to anticipate these things happening. And then injuries obviously are a big piece. And a lot with the pandemic, with people getting sick and not being able to train and play, all those complications. So those are just 3 examples, but I encourage you to think about things that have happened to your team or to your family, to your organization, and make a list of those things, and then be able to start to plan in the next slide that Brad will show. All right, so once we anticipate some things and we've gone over some situations that have happened, all right, then let's make a plan. Because there's this quote is, panic is what happens when you don't have a plan. All of a sudden you're just winging it and you have no idea what you're doing, and then you're getting frazzled, all right, and you lose your focus and you forget to do your breathing. your breathing that'll bring you back to a nice space. And so then we're all over the place. I used to tell my Division I soccer team, we're going to play quick, but not in a rush. There's a big difference there. We're going to play quick. We're going to be on our front foot. We're going to be faster mentally and technically and tactically, but we're never going to be spazzing out and being in a mad dash about the field. We're going to feel composed, even though we're playing really quickly. So here's some situations on how to plan to be able to handle situations. So we talked about, those nice slow inhale and exhale, having some mantras or affirmations. There's one example there, I got this. Going back into a situation where we realize that our body language is so important to those around us. So as a coach or as a parent, if we're stomping the ground or breaking clipboards or yelling too loud, it's just going to fly right down to the rest of the players, and then they're going to feed off that. So again, it's about modeling success. And then other affirmations, there's a couple examples there. Keep working, next play. I love next play because for like our strikers, our forwards, they may only have 3 or 4 good chances to score. And if they keep missing chances and get further and further down their confidence, they're never going to be able to hit that 4th one in the last minute of the game to win the game. So one way to be able to rebound from a mistake is have an affirmation that pulls you out of that last mistake and puts you in present moving forward. And one expression would be next play. So just a few examples of encouraging affirmations and quality triggers to be able to push you forward.
Yeah, that's great. And, most of the time when Matt and I ask players and we say, what's your plan for when you make a mistake? Or to coaches, what's your plan for when, you go a person down, right? When these things happen. And a lot of times there's not a plan in place. And so the same thing goes for parenting, right? That I don't know about you, but when I've watched my kids play, I'm usually pretty calm until about the last 5 or 10 minutes. And all of a sudden you'll hear me saying things like, goal side, make a run, get back, right? And I'll hear myself, I go, what are you doing? And I didn't used to have a plan. I would just hope that I would be composed, but I would lose my composure and say things that weren't helpful, right? That's the coach's job and the player's job to figure it out. So when I started having a plan, I would just say, they have to figure it out themselves. Got to figure it out themselves. It'd be so hard, right? You watch your kid and you want to tell them things, but you're like, they got to figure this out, right? If they make a mistake and the coach gets upset or teammates do, it's an opportunity to learn, right? But we, just like to a spelling test, if your kid had a spelling test, you wouldn't show up at school and peek through the window and go, remember how to spell coffee, right? You wouldn't do it, right? It's like, that's what they have to figure out. So having a plan to manage our own stress when things don't go well for our kids is very, very important. And when you can do that, sometimes, a talk in your head might just be, encourage. And that means body language, right? So when they make a mistake, you look at them, your eyes are level, your shoulders are back, you smile, give them a nod your head and say, tap your chest or give them a thumbs up or say, plenty of time, right? You do something that lets them know you believe they're capable of continuing to work and go after it, right? And that will help them have that grit, but you need to have a plan. So the last element on here Matt's going to talk about is practice.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. We've got just a few slides, probably 3 or 4 minutes left, and then we'll open up for questions and be out of here definitely before the top of the hour. But yeah, practice. And I'll give you an example for me. I have a 14-year-old son that is more basketball than soccer now. And on the way to practice, I always ask them, like, hey, what do you want to do today in practice? What's your intentions? And so you can do that as parents, you can do that as coaches. And I try to get them a little more detailed and focus on the process. You might say, I want to be a better rebounder. Okay, what do you have to do? And they'll talk about the skills, they'll talk about the hunger, they'll talk about the positioning. So get your players and get your coaches to kind of flesh these things out verbally and share it with others. They become accountable, and also to creating some good visualization, some good neural pathways to do the right thing. Go ahead, Brad, next slide.
All right. And just remember, the more you practice those mental skills in practice, they'll translate to the game. So coaches, having your plan, right? Predict 2 or 3 setbacks that are going to happen to the players in practice, have your plan in place, and then go over it and then check in to see how you did. And the more you do that in practice, the more it'll translate to a game. Parents, the same way. If you go watch your kids in training, practice being encouraging, practice good body language, practice staying composed when they make mistakes and have setbacks. And if you can do that more in practice, now you can translate that more to the game. Okay, so another really powerful way to help strengthen grit in your players is focusing on and then praising their perseverance after setbacks, right? That's what we want to do. As a soccer parent, you know, I used to worry so much about my kids and would be so stressed, and they were defenders, so their mistakes could sometimes lead to goals. And I wouldn't want them to feel bad or coach to get mad at them. So I would worry about that. And I really didn't pay as much attention to how they responded. And then I started reading different books and things. I'm like, you know what, wait a minute, I'm totally missing the boat here. The goal is for them not to make mistakes, right? And fear them making mistakes. The goal is to see how they respond to them. How do they respond and respond well? So I made it the point that when I'd watch my kids play, I would be like, okay, at least once a half, I'm going to take a mental note or write down one time where they made a mistake and they responded well. And responding well doesn't mean they play amazing, they score a goal, they crush it. It means they keep working, they keep attacking the ball, they call for the ball, they make a run, right? They still are engaged after a mistake. And then when the game would be over, that would be when we talk about the game. Sometimes it would be at home later on, or if they want to do it because we're walking the field, that's the first thing I would talk about. You know what, I'm really proud of you. You know what, I noticed that this happened, you made a mistake, that person got around you and they crossed and they scored, and I could see your head went down. And then before the game restarted, you got your head up, you went after it, and you kept working, you know, and it wasn't your best day today, but you worked really hard after that, and I'm really proud of you. When you focus on that, it makes your brain more likely to notice it, helps override the negative bias. And when you praise them for working hard and responding well, they start to go, oh, wait a minute, mom and dad aren't overly focused on me making the mistakes. They're not going to like hammer me and ask me why I did it. They think it's cool when I work hard and keep going after the mistake. Now they start to feel more free. They have less fear of anxiety, and they stick with things longer, right? And one of the benefits of grit we didn't talk about is that's how you get better at things. You keep doing it over and over and over again. So you learn new things, you get better, right? If you don't have grit, you stop once it gets hard. And if you can have the most amazing skill and talent on the field, but if you don't have grit, it only lasts when things are going well. As soon as things go poorly, then that stops. So you focusing on them responding well can have an enormous impact on them focusing on the response rather than the mistake that they made. Matt, anything you want to add just about as a coach in that sphere?
No, you can show the next slide, and there's a coach on there that a lot of people will know of. So, you know, you can read that quote by Jurgen Klopp. You know, if you're not a big English Premier League fan, you might not know he's the Liverpool coach and won a Champions League, and just a great guy. And I think it's a great quote because it underlines really what we're all about, which is responding to situations like Brad just explaining, having a growth mindset, being process oriented versus outcome oriented, focusing on our performance versus the result, because often the result and the outcome we actually don't control. We actually control very little of it because there's so many other things going on. Teammates, coaches, referees, the opponent, the weather. All we can really do is tackle what's in front of us. And so helping your child, helping your team, helping your workmates, just to do what I believe is excellent, which is be present and put your best effort into it and recognize that's all you can handle. So go ahead, Brad, next slide.
All right, so to recap, the brain's negative bias. Remember, if you've ever walked around going, what's wrong with me? Why am I so negative? Why do I, get stuck in what didn't go well? Or even if you get an opportunity for something like a chance to coach in a certain tournament or play in a tournament, and all of a sudden you're filled with worry and stress, that's how our brains are wired, to have an overly negative focus. But there are tools and strategies like doing some breathing, focusing on how we're going to respond, being prepared for those, having a plan for them and practicing it can help you override some of that negative bias. We talked about those are some of the tools we mentioned to strengthen players' grit. And again, helping players respond to setbacks, and coaches, you as well, like what you say to your team, individuals, when they make mistakes can have an enormous impact on their willingness to keep engaging and keep working. And so just encourage you to focus on how to encourage and motivate them to keep going after it when they make mistakes. And what you say in your body language has an enormous part as a coach and a parent.
So I just put in the chat there, feel free to start typing in questions or comments or takeaways. While you're doing that, I'll put out this slide as well. So one of our best services that we want you to consider is this thing called Soccer Resilience FC Football Club. And it is incredible. We call it like the gym for your soccer mind. And it's got so much more than what Brad and I presented today about all of our 4 pillars. And it's got content focused for players, coaches, and parents. So check it out on soccerresilience.com. It's $100 for a family for the entire year, or you can do a monthly membership, which is $10 a month, or you can do a team membership for $300. So if you have a team of, say, 20 players, that's $15 for the whole year. So sometimes one parent will pay for the whole team, or the club will pay for it, or every player pitches in and helps it out, or maybe the coach can take care of it. But soccerresilience.com is the way to find out more about Soccer Resilience FC, which is again, an online portal with articles and activations and videos and live cast and a lot more. Really, really gives you all that you're going to need for that 4th critical pillar, the psychological side of being a soccer parent, player, and coach. Go ahead, Brad.
Right. So wanted to include this. This is our ambassadors, and these are different people, some current professional players, some retired professional players, people in the game. We have coaches, some people who know like Walker Zimmerman there, the U.S. men's national team. He was our first ambassador. Kerry Riccaro, who's now playing for Angel City FC. Brant Bronico, North Carolina alumni as well. He's playing for Charlotte FC. And that we do mental training sessions. So something we do Zoom or in person, kind of depending on what the pandemic and what's opportunities available. We do mental training sessions where we really kind of dive deeper into some things we talked about today. It's a great way to help your team, your organization get more information, more skills, more hands-on. And we have it's ourselves, it's our ambassadors who can come and present. And so just wanted to talk about that option too. It's a great way to really strengthen your mental game and get some specific things. We have those times for question and answers to dive deep into some of those concepts to really learn them well, deeper level. Okay. And lastly, you can follow us on social media. A great landing spot, as Matt mentioned, is our website, soccerresilience.com. You can learn more about Soccer Resilience FC training sessions. We have a resource tab that has lots of articles, blogs, information. Our YouTube channel, Soccer Resilience, has some great videos for parents and players and coaches. So I just encourage you to follow us there, get some great information as well. Okay, so it looks like we have some, you have any questions there, Matt?
Not yet, just a couple of thank yous and a couple of notes, and I put some information in there. That ambassador page was hard for you guys to really read, but I am glad that you pointed out Walker Zimmerman, because if you're anything like me, you're really looking forward to the U.S. national team game tomorrow night, 7:30, big World Cup qualifier that Walker will be on the team and potentially in the starting lineup. They haven't named it yet. He could be captain as well. So it was neat to have Walker Zimmerman come on, gosh, about this time last year. And now we have, 14 or 15 ambassadors, pro players, mental performance experts, meditation experts, visualization experts, all kinds of variety of folks on Soccer Resilience that can serve you and your club. And we are working within North Carolina Youth Soccer to hopefully very, very soon announce a full-on partnership, which would be great because we'll be able to deliver more content towards the organization that they can then put out to everybody, and also some special rates for some of our services. But yeah, guys, if nobody else has any questions or comments, thank you. I really appreciate it. As a North Carolina native and current resident, if you didn't notice, Brad's got a suntan and it's still sunny out there in San Diego. I'm jealous he's out there, but I'm here in the Charlotte area, just north of Charlotte. Please be in touch. You see Brad's email there, Dr. Brad Miller at soccerresilience.com. And Brad, why don't you close us out?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is, something Matt and I talked a long time ago, how fun it would be to get back to North Carolina. So we're really excited to be here. And just if you have further questions, you can contact us through, as Matt said, the email from soccerresilience.com. And just thank you for your time.
Matt.
See you guys.
Brad, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Thank you all for signing on, and we hope you got take one or two pieces of this back with you to your players and to your own children. And if we can do anything for you, we will continue to share information as our partnership with Soccer Resilience develops. And thank you all for signing on. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, Carrie. Good night.
Good night.